Well, folks, this is the end of my last lecture of the semester. Thank you for your attention. Questions? They emphasize not only your curiosity, but also your commitment to your chosen profession. See you at the exam. Mr. J collected the papers from his desk and put them in his briefcase. A few students rushed over to him to ask him a few questions. This is a good course, he thought. So many questions. High attendance. I'm sure this is the color of future medicine. The instructor turned to the students and began to answer their questions. Jay was born and raised in a family of medical professionals. Not just any family, but a dynasty. The tradition of men getting a medical education went back to ancient times when his great-great-grandfather had been educated and became a doctor. His two sons also became doctors, and his daughters, including Jay's great-grandmother, were nurses during World War I. At the hospital, she met a young surgeon who operated beautifully, and everyone spoke of him as a future medical luminary. However, the Great Depression came. He abandoned medicine and traveled the country in search of a living. During his rare visits home, the failed luminary managed to make his wife 4 children, 3 girls and the youngest boy, Grandpa Jay. But salvation did come to the family. One fine morning in the mailbox, Jay appeared in the notice, which wrote that his father's brother Victor died, leaving no other heirs. The only thing that complicated the situation was that he lived far away from his family, in Russia, and at that time already in the Soviet Union. But at the family council, Jay and his wife decided that it would be better to inherit, that is, to move into the house left by his brother and use his small savings. And so they did. The youngest son, Ben, grew up, graduated from the institute and became a nationally renowned infectious disease doctor. He developed and implemented treatments for diseases such as diphtheria, polio, and tetanus. His textbooks have been used by students for generations. Ben, let's go to the club. How many times can you sit in your books? Guys, we're in session. We have an exam the day after tomorrow, so we need to go out. Come on, girls, we'll distract you a little, and you can go back to your bacteriology class. For the first time in a year of study, Ben was taken to a dance by his classmates. He watched his friends flirting with the pretty nurses while he sat quietly on the sidelines and chuckled. As his friends milled around in the center of the hall, he saw through them to another girl sitting alone in a chair, looking sadly at the fun. "Girl, why aren't you dancing?" A young man came over. "My name is Ben." "Dora," she answered. "Tomorrow is a difficult exam. If I pass, I'll qualify as a nurse. I can't have any fun, I'm worried. And I have a bacteriology exam the day after tomorrow. I have to study too. And my friends brought me here. Why don't we walk down the street with you? I know a little about medicine." He smiled. "I can answer questions." They escaped from the club and walked along the embankment on a warm early summer evening. The lilacs were already blooming, smelling green, but the ground had not yet warmed up enough to make it feel hot. Dora shivered, and Ben threw his jacket around her shoulders. "You're not cold, are you?" "No, my blood is hot." He smiled. She turned down one of the alleys. "This way. Then I'll walk you." He led the girl to the dormitory. "Let's meet after my exam." "Right here, on the embankment where we turned." 5 o'clock. He suggested it. "Okay." Dora smiled and disappeared through the doors of the building. All the next day, Ben, studying for the exam, remembered with a smile the quiet, pretty girl from the club. When he passed his bacteriology exam with a perfect score, he hurried to the meeting place. Dora came up there as well. "I take it you're not from around here if you live in the dormitory?" "Yes, my parents live in the village. We're having problems with the paramedic there. So I decided to study to be a nurse first, then a doctor maybe." "And you plan to go back to your parents?" "Of course." "Do you know how bad it is when the nearest doctor is 15 kilometers away? Let me show you the city. It's really beautiful." After the third date, Ben realized he was in love. He was looking forward to the meeting and decided to propose to the girl. "I'll go to the country with her if I have to." Youthfully carefree, he thought. 2 doctors are always better than 1. "Mom, do you think it's good if I go to work in the village?" "Why, son?" Mother looked at Ben with surprise. "Do you want to finish the institute and then go somewhere far away?" "Yeah, well, they need doctors there too. I don't have to tell you about that. In the countryside, a paramedic is enough. And it's not an easy job. I think they're starting to look at you here too. Your father told me. I don't want my father. I want to do it myself. Well, I understand that. But how will you go there? Who's going to run the household? In the countryside, you can't do anything without him. And you grew up in the city. You don't even know how to dig. And I'll marry some village beauty. That's what it's all about. You're in love, aren't you? And she's from the country. And who's that? You'll find out. She's studying nursing here, then she plans to become a paramedic like you and go back to her place. So, are you two that serious? I want to ask her to marry me. You're all grown up. Well, it's your life. Do what you want. Just tell your father. Dad never went back to medicine. His hands were already trembling, but he still had many acquaintances among his former colleagues, including those at the institute, where he got a job in the economic part. So he's getting married. Well done. I won't scold you for the village. If you want to go, go. But you have to finish your studies first. Yes, we'll leave only after graduation. That's fine. On Sunday they planned to take a boat trip on the river, and Ben had already arranged with a friend of the countryman to take transportation from him, and there in solitude to propose marriage. Tonight at 4 o'clock without a declaration of war. Ben froze in a daze, then got himself together, and he and his father drove to the military enlistment office. There was already a crowd of men there, even women. An old military officer with eyes red from a sleepless night stood on the porch. Please calm down. I ask those who have officer ranks and those who are enlisted, as well as those who have military experience, to stay. The rest of you, please leave. You will be sent summonses if necessary. You can also contact the military registration departments at work. My father came out glum. Said no, I cannot go to the front. They came home. Mom was on shift at the hospital. It wasn't until they entered the apartment that Ben realized he'd missed his date. Dora was sitting on a bench outside the dormitory entrance reading a textbook. When Ben didn't show up at the appointed time, she had waited in place for 3 hours. Then she decided that she would sit on the bench and, in order not to waste time, she took her anatomy textbook with her. I'm sorry, please. She heard a familiar voice and looked up. Ben was standing next to her. Don't apologize, I understand, she said. I was waiting for you to tell you that I'm going to my parents. My help is needed there. My father and I went to the military enlistment office. He was not taken, and I was sent back to the institute. But I'm going to the front anyway. Promise me you'll wait for my return. He handed her a thin ring. It's our family ring. My father gave it to my mother, and now she's allowed me to give it to you. Dora took the ring. Ben, I'll wait for you at our place every year on the 3rd of June. Just come back. Their first kiss was both sweet, like a promise, and bitter from the battle that had broken out. Ben and his father went to the front as brothers. At first they were in the same brigade, but after being wounded, life separated them to different fronts. Ben wrote home to his mother, but received no reply. So until the end of the war he didn't know what happened to his father or how his mother was doing. After being wounded, Ben was pulled through the war by his battle buddy Ivan. When he tried to track him down after being discharged, it turned out that Ivan had been killed by shrapnel a week later at the front, where death, though terrible, was commonplace. Ben had long experienced this particular loss. Therefore, afraid of receiving bad news from home, he did not try to look for his relatives. The second wound, after which he was discharged, he received in April of the 45th, and Victory Day met in a hospital in Moscow, where he was sent for treatment. On the 3rd of June, a young but already gray-haired man with a stick, limping on his right leg, walked along the embankment of his native city. The day was cold, it was raining, and people were running past. Ben saw the figure of a girl leaning on the fence, standing under an umbrella, looking in his direction. He drew closer. I knew you'd come back. Dora threw herself around his neck. Ben put his arms around her. And I knew you'd wait for me. Dora had grown up a lot. The youthful puffiness of her face was gone, and there were huge bruises under her eyes. But it was still his girl, the one he'd been thinking about all through the war, not even knowing where to write. Were you wounded? She looked at her wand. And more than once. Ben smiled. But it all went away. What about you? We were given our diplomas early and sent to the local hospital. So I didn't have time to go to the village. I've been working here all this time. So you're a registered nurse? Yes. And I'm planning to apply for paramedic training. Why don't you just apply to be a doctor? I'm just about to go back to school. Why don't you come with me? Give it a try. Ben and Dora and Ben's mother lived in the 2-room apartment. His father had gone missing in '42. He hadn't been heard from since. The older sisters had left home before the war. Ben's mother worked as an obstetrician gynecologist at the city hospital. Ben and Dora studied at the institute. The future doctor, having seen the wounded, who died in the hospital not from wounds, but from infections, decided to transfer to the Faculty of Infectious Diseases. And Dora was taken on the medical business. After the war, the girl had constant stomach problems, she did not eat much, and from some food she began to vomit. So the first person to notice Dora's pregnancy was Ben's mom. "Why, Dora, did you feel nauseous after breakfast?" she asked the girl. "Yeah, I guess the cottage cheese wasn't fresh." "I don't think it was the cottage cheese." "When was your last period?" "I don't even know. I don't keep track." They disappeared from time to time during the war, too. In the war, they disappeared from overexertion. But now you have to take care of your health. Why don't you come to the hospital with me tomorrow and I'll have you checked out? The due date was already 12 weeks. Ben's mother was concerned about the increased nutrition of her daughter-in-law and told her son not to bother the girl for nothing. When in a month the mother-in-law realized that the fetus was developing normally, and Dora got better and looked less tortured, the women decided to tell about the pregnancy and the father of the child. "So, son, what are your future plans?" Mom asked Ben at dinner. "For what?" He was surprised. "Well, for life, of course." "What do you mean?" "I'm going to graduate from the institute, then I'll go to internship. I'll study infections in practice. Maybe we'll go to some country on a long-term business trip. I'm afraid you won't be able to do that anytime soon." "Why not? Did something happen?" "Yes, something's happened, and it could affect your whole life." "Oh, come on. Ben, you're going to be a father." Dora, who had been silent until then, said quietly, "What?" He didn't understand. "Your wife is pregnant, that's what?" Mom said loudly. "And if I were you, I'd be jumping up and down and kissing Dora." Ben jumped up from the table and sat down beside his wife. "I've been thinking you've gotten so pretty lately. And when we're expecting a new baby?" "In 4 months, just in time for summer," Ben's mom answered. "I, as her attending physician, will now monitor not only the health of the future mother, but also your behavior. No eating disorders, and lots of fruits and vegetables, and less stress at the institute. I suggest that you leave the institute for a while and then recover. My son was born on June 3rd. It's our day." The young father rejoiced. It means that he will live happily ever after. He asked his wife for permission to name his son Peter, in honor of a comrade who died at the front, who pulled him out after being wounded. Already after 6 months, the baby was identified in the nursery, and Dora continued her education. In kindergarten, Peter was found to have absolute hearing, and his parents enrolled him in a music school. In addition, the boy stood out a ringing voice and soloed in the school choir. In the 7th grade, next to him on the stage went Sister Lana, who was born 5 years later. In high school, Peter graduated from music school, and together with friends organized an ensemble of guitarists, which performed at all amateur competitions. And although the boy grew up in a medical family, often went to work at his parents' and at the institute at his grandmother's, where she was by then teaching, Peter had no thoughts of entering the doctor. He wanted to be a musician. It was his mother who resented this the most. "Peter, what are you doing? You're not going to be a vocalist. You're going to stand on a stage. You're from a dynasty of doctors. Do you really want to be a singer?" "Mom, just a musician for now, and maybe a singer later. Don't even think about it. A man should have a serious profession. Your grandfather was a surgeon. Your father was a famous infectious disease specialist. My grandmother and I are not the last people in town medicine. Lana looks up to you. You're going to ruin her future with your adolescent infatuation. But you're the ones who put me in music school." "Yes, but we did it for your development, not to turn you into a pop singer. If fate wills it, you'll sing with any education. But for now you have to go to medical school." Peter was a rebel by nature, but after thinking over his mother's words, he decided that she was right and applied to medical school. What was his surprise when 5 years later, his parents allowed his sister to go to music school, where they absolutely refused to let him go. She's a woman. She can sing and play. Her husband has to earn money, and you have a family to feed. Studying was hard, but in the 3rd year, the young man realized that he was most interested in surgery and followed in the footsteps of his missing grandfather. Ben's mother was very proud of her grandson. She often praised Peter to his teachers. He has a steady hand. He sees the problem well, doesn't try to pass the buck. In those words, she recognized her disappeared husband in her grandson, and she often wiped away a tear while sitting at the table when no one else could see it. Peter liked surgical practice. He immediately saw the result of his actions and was not afraid to make mistakes. In internship, he was already trusted to assist complex operations to famous surgeons throughout the city. Good afternoon. Peter picked up the receiver of the ringing phone. Yes, I'm listening. Tell me, do you know Mr. Ben? Of course, he's my father. Do you know where he is? Is something wrong? He's at work. Excuse me. Do you know a J. Grace, born 1896? Sarge. That's my grandfather. He went missing in 42. We found a mass grave near Smolensk. We think your grandfather was buried there. Are there any other close relatives besides your father? Yes, my grandmother, his wife. Then we're waiting for them at the military enlistment office. Let them bring their documents and his photos if they have any. On Thursday after the enlistment office, Grandma arrived in tears. It was the first time Peter had seen her like that. Father was depressed, too. They laid out on the table the missing grandfather's book and watch, as well as the new medal for combat merit, which he never had time to receive. All the family members were seated at the table. Grandma raised a shot to you, my Jay, for being found. Look how big our family is. I wish the grandchildren had had a chance to meet you. Here's to the victory you brought us so close. And she drained the shot glass alone. When Peter was practicing in the city hospital, Lana, his younger sister, was just graduating from music school. Her girlfriends began to show up at the house, with whom she was studying for exams together. One day Rena, Lana's friend, brought her younger sister Julia, who was studying for medical school. Peter was just getting some sleep after duty and was in the kitchen, where his friend's sister was sitting. Julia, why medical school? Rena sings and plays the violin. And you chose such a serious profession? Peter asked. Julia just shrugged her shoulders. I don't have an ear like hers, and I won't get into college. Where else? Teachers? Why does it have to be medicine or pedagogy? There's accounting, journalism, merchandising, after all, accounting. I immediately imagine 40-year-old aunts with a bundle on their heads, sitting at a calculating machine. That's what doctors are like, always in white, taking care of people. So, what's your specialty? Surgery. So you and I are future colleagues. And what area of surgery are you planning on specializing in? I'd like to be a neurosurgeon. Well, that's worthy. It's a profession that requires precision and care. I hope it works out for you. The next time Peter saw Julia was 3 years later at Lana's birthday party. She had changed from a teenager into a beautiful girl with smooth movements and an attentive gaze. Julia, is that you? I don't recognize you. How are your studies going? Peter approached her. Hello, Peter. Thank you. I'm fine. Did you achieve your goal of specializing in neurosurgery? Yeah, it's my first year. There's a long way to go. That's true. But if you need help, you know who to call. Thank you, Peter. Peter began to visit the institute more often, finding various excuses. He had one excuse, though, to see Julia. Whenever she saw him, she would stop to say hello and have a few words with him. One day they met in the courtyard at the entrance. Julia, I'm tired of making excuses to meet you. Why don't you just go out with me? Peter decided. Julia lowered her gorgeous green eyes and smiled slightly. Of course, Peter. And so another medic was added to the family. At Peter and Julia's wedding, her sister Rena was the one who resented her the most. No, just think what kind of fiancé she'd found while we were studying solfeggio. In her 6th year, Julia got pregnant and took a sabbatical. Peter's grandmother was already looking after the 3rd generation, but not in time to become a great-grandmother. A month before her grandson was born, she slipped into a diabetic coma and died. Dora was on duty at her bedside 24 hours a day, but the doctors could not help. The elderly woman's organs began to fail, and all medications only prolonged her agony. At the farewell there were many of her students and grateful patients. The grave was covered with wreaths and flowers. After the death of their mother, Ben and Dora received an apartment from the city, having been on the waiting list for almost 20 years. And after the birth of their son, the young couple had their own place. Peter and Julia named the boy Jay. He grew up bright and agile. So that his energy did not have a destructive effect, his parents enrolled the boy in swimming at the age of 4. Coaches predicted a great future for him, as he could hold his breath for a long time and practically swim half of the pool underwater. In addition to the pool, he played soccer with the boys, skated in winter, jumped from trees, and in general in every way tested his body for strength. After a fight on the hockey court, 8-year-old Jay's arm was cut with a skate. He was brought to Children's Hospital and his parents were called. His father came in, watched the kid get his cut stitched up. Well, scars adorn a man. Mom was upset though. Maybe you'll be more careful next time. The boy blinked and nodded. There's no such thing as a kid without bruises. Julia's husband reassured her when she saw the next bruise on her son's body. At 12, Jay flew over the handlebars of his bicycle and broke his arm. The first day of summer vacation. With a sigh, Julia took him to the trauma center. The fracture was displaced. Jay was admitted to the hospital and underwent 2 surgeries. The mother felt sorry for the child suffering from pain, but she did not show it, but reprimanded him. You don't know how to break? What if it wasn't my elbow, but my head? If it was my head, you would have operated on me, said Bright Jay. That's not funny. It's true what they say. The sickest kids usually come from a family of doctors, just like the worst teachers have the worst students. Caught up with my son. While Jay was in a cast and unable to play sports or run with his friends, he often crossed paths at home with his Aunt Rena, who played in the Philharmonic and invited him to concerts. The young man, who had a good ear, liked symphonic music, but he wanted to make it more modern or something. He asked his best friend Nikon to teach him how to play the guitar. Nikon was self-taught. He wrote poems and arranged them on the 3 chords of an instrument he had inherited from his grandfather. Despite some falseness and scratchy rhymes, he was popular among his peers. Look, said a friend with whom they studied together since the 4th grade. You take it, you clasp your fingers like this and then like this and like this. Here, try it. Jay tried it again. That's good. Now, with your other hand, you just gently stroke the strings. No, keep your fingers tight. Jay tried his best, but he couldn't do it. I'm going to my grandmother's for the vacations, Nikon told him. Here's a tool for you. Every day learn to clamp and play. You should get hard calluses on your fingers, just like mine. Nikon held out his hand. The pads of his fingers were indeed hard. The father came in from duty when he heard some sound in his son's room. He knocked and peeked through the door. Jay was sitting on the bed, diligently strumming the strings. Is this your new hobby? Yeah, I'm learning to play guitar. I've already memorized the chords. Where'd you get the instrument? Nikon gave it to me to play while he was away. Before that, I learned it at his house. My fingertips are already hard. Take a look. And the boy held out his left hand to his father. Peter looked at Julia. She shrugged. Well, all right. The father relented. But if they start complaining about your grades at school, you'll have to forget about the guitar. What's this? Our grandson has stopped cutting his hair? Ben asked his son when the family met at Jay's birthday party at the beginning of the summer. He's playing rock guitar. It reminds me of someone. Dora grinned. No, it doesn't. Mom, I wanted to get a music degree and he just plays guitar and passes it off as music. I got the hint right away. We have a deal with him that if there are problems in school, then this hobby will remain in the past. What makes you think he's into you? His aunt's a musician, by the way. Maybe Jay will follow in her footsteps. I'm not going to be a professional musician, Grandma. I just want to be able to play at parties or in the yard. You know how guitar players are respected? Yeah, sure. I just don't understand why you don't have to cut your hair. So, more respect? Grandpa sarcastically said. It's just that all foreign guitarists have long hair, and you want to be like everyone else, Ben shared. All right, said Dad. If you're not going to be a musician, I'm relieved. What are you going to be then? You're a big boy now, and it's time to decide where you want to go. Well, in our family there are many options, smiled my son. Since I'm not going to be a musician, I'm going to be a doctor. These are not the words of a boy, but of a man. Julia rejoiced. And what section of medicine you are most attracted to? I haven't decided yet, but most likely some kind of hardware research. It's a modern trend in medicine. He has 2 years of school and then another 2 years at the institute, until they are divided into narrow specializations. Nikon's best friend Nikon suddenly stopped going to school in his last year. At first Jay didn't worry, but it's not like he was sick. When Nikon didn't show up after a month, Jay called him at home. His mom answered the phone. Nikon can't come over. He's in the hospital. What happened? He's sick. But he's been sick for so long. What hospital is he in? Can I visit him? He's in the city hospital. But they don't let outsiders in there, only relatives. Mom, can you find out about Nikon? Jay spoke to his mom tonight. He's in your hospital. What ward? I don't know. His mom wouldn't tell me. What do you envision? I'll ask Nikon in every department. I don't understand why he's in our hospital and not in the children's hospital. He's 16 now, like me. Maybe that's why they put him in the adult hospital. Mom, please. He hasn't been to school in a month and his mom says they won't let strangers in. Listen, Peter. My son asked me to find out about a friend of his at the hospital. I did. Now I don't know how to tell him. What's wrong? He's in oncology. He's not coming out. Is that his Nikon? Yeah, you should tell him. Or better yet, make an appointment to take him to a friend's house. Jay, you're going to miss school tomorrow. Why am I getting this gift? I made an appointment with Nikon's doctor. They'll let you in. Mom, you're magic. What can I get him? I think he'll just be happy to see you. But you can take some fruit and a bottle of water. You always need that at the hospital. So I ran to the store. Wait, I haven't told you everything yet. You see, son, Nikon. He's not coming out of the hospital. You mean he can't walk? No, Jay. He's dying. He doesn't have much time left. Nikon, maybe you got something wrong. That would be beautiful. Julia sighed. Jay came back depressed and went to his room. When his father came in, his son was sitting at his textbooks writing solutions. Bitter tears were dripping into the notebook. What's up, son? Why is everything so unfair? You know how cheerful he was. He loved to laugh out loud. Now he's lying pale. He can't talk, only writhing in pain. How many generations of doctors do we have in our family? Well, I haven't counted. A lot. And why couldn't we come up with anything for those many generations? That's not fair. Why am I sitting at my textbooks while Nikon, young, funny, and 1,000 times more talented, dies in a hospital bed? I shouldn't have to tell you this. But life isn't fair sometimes, son. Jay stood at his friend's funeral and sobbed silently at the scent of lilacs. He doesn't feel it anymore. He's not in pain anymore. The young man reassured himself. But that only made him feel more painful. He delved even deeper into his textbooks. I've decided to go into surgery, Jay told his parents at dinner. They smiled, happy that their son had chosen their direction. Only I'll specialize in oncology, he added firmly. Do you realize that it has the highest mortality rate? Often the patient cannot withstand intervention and die on the table. Hundreds of people like Nikon will pass through you. Peter was afraid that under the influence of loss, his son might make a mistake by choosing this direction. You know, Dad, if I can save even one of those hundreds, that's a great result. Someone I can restore not only their faith in justice, but in life itself. The first time her mother took Charlotte to the theater was when she was 5. Cheerful, loud voice, Carlson ran around the little one. He was very naturally offended by him and asked for jam so nicely that Charlotte even resented her mother because they did not bring the jar with them. The next time Mama mentioned the theater, Charlotte put a small jar of raspberry jam in her bag. Even though her mother had warned her that it would be a different story, Charlotte still hoped that she might meet Carlson in the foyer at intermission and give him the jar so he wouldn't be upset. There was no man in full bloom. But at the end of the play, when everyone carried flowers to the actors, Charlotte gave the jar to the little brigand, who delighted her with her courage. By high school, Charlotte had become a regular at the theater. At recess, she would show her classmates sketches from the plays she went to alone, portraying all the characters. Mrs. Rihanna, the vice principal for extracurricular activities, caught her doing this. "Charlotte, and you do not want to come to the theater club?" she asked the girl. "We put on different plays there, including fairy tales. You are so good at portraying fairy tale characters at recess. Don't you want to try it on stage?" "Theater," the girl gasped. "But not yet in the theater, but in the Creative Center. But we put on plays there and invite students and parents to them. And for every holiday we are sure to prepare some novelty. Do you want to try it?" Charlotte's eyes lit up with joy. She nodded, afraid to scare away the happiness that came over her with words. Now, after school, she did not stay in after-school care, but went to the Children's Center to rehearse with the other acting students under Mrs. Rihanna's supervision. Charlotte's first role was a fox from a fairy tale. At first, the girl was upset that she was being forced to play a bad character, but Rihanna explained to her that you can't have good plays without bad characters. But what's a fairy tale without the Snow Queen? And Carlson, when you think about it, isn't such a good character. He's always hooliganizing and setting a bad example. Don't you think so? The girl agreed. She gave it her all, driving the hair out of the hut with anger. And what a beautiful costume they gave her. That's right, a fox. The premiere of the play took place before the Teacher's Day. All the teachers of the school and parents were invited to the assembly hall of the Children's Center. When Charlotte looked out from backstage, she was stunned. She had never seen so many people here before. It was one thing to play on stage with the kids from the circle with empty chairs, where sometimes only Mrs. Rihanna could sit, and quite another, in a room full of strangers. Charlotte called her mother too. Only in such a crowd there was no way to see her. For the first time, the girl learned what is the excitement of the stage. And although Rihanna calmed her young troupe in every possible way, still someone sometimes forgot the words. Charlotte, to her exit, gathered her strength and gave the premiere performance to the hurrah. After the end of the fairy tale and bows, the actors were released to their parents. Charlotte, not having time to change her clothes, ran into the hall to look for her mom. What a beautiful fox. Came from different places. Then she heard her mom's voice, and then she saw her. Mom ran to her down the aisle, opened her arms. "You're my little star, the best sly fox ever. I really liked it. Mom, look how I learned. Wasn't it like a real theater?" asked her daughter, and Mom happily nodded and kissed the child. From then on, Charlotte disappeared in the circle all day long. And on weekends, she and her mother went to a real theater, where they watched more serious productions. Charlotte noticed with interest how the actor gestures, where he lowers his voice, and where, on the contrary, breaks into a scream, and tried to repeat it in her classes. Often she succeeded in something interesting, and Mrs. Rihanna was pleased with the girl's play. It went on like that until 6th grade. And then, after the new year, Charlotte's mother went into the hospital. For 6 months the girl lived with her father, with whom her mother divorced long ago. Then at her grandparents', after her mom was taken away in an ambulance. The girl didn't see her until 2 months later, for 10 minutes on the territory of the clinic. Mom lost a lot of weight and looked at her daughter with happy but very sick eyes. "Mom, what's wrong with you? When will you be discharged? I missed you. I miss you too. But this is the only way we can see each other for now. How's school going? How's the theater?" Charlotte lowered her head. "I don't go to the club. It's a long drive to my grandmother, and then they don't let me come back late. You're my poor girl. Don't worry. I'll be discharged and you'll go on stage again. Mommy, get well soon. I really want to go home." Mommy wasn't discharged until the summer. Charlotte was on vacation. The club wasn't working either, so she and Mommy put on plays at home. The next time Mom was hospitalized, Charlotte was about to enter the theater school. Doctors no longer promised recovery, but also refused to discharge home. The girl had to forget about the dream of becoming an actress and get a job in the clinic nurse to be near her mother in her last days. Mom left painfully. Charlotte sat with her all the free time from duties, washed her, took out the duck and just stroked her arm. "Mom, I'm here. Are you in pain? Let me get the nurse. Why are you always here? Why aren't you studying for your exams?" her mom asked her in the heat of oblivion. "I still have plenty of time.
You'll get better and I'll start studying. Are you sure you won't miss the entrance? No way. I want to do theater so badly. With a tremor in her voice, Charlotte lied. Mom was less and less conscious and had been unconscious for the last few sessions. Charlotte buried her mother in early September and began to think about how to live her life. Become an actress, she was already reluctant. The last 6 months of her mother's illness has become too heavy test for the daughter. She lost the passion with which she dreamed of the stage. She no longer wanted to play anyone, and where she wanted to go now, she didn't understand. Charlotte saw an advertisement for an accountancy course. They were not far from the school. It started in October. They offered a good stipend. That's how Charlotte chose her profession.
The place of work after the course, she looked for a short time. Thinking that she was known at the hospital, she went there and showed her diploma. She was gladly hired as an assistant accountant. The girl was good with numbers, knew how best to prepare reports. And when one of her colleagues retired, Charlotte was offered a new position with an increase in salary. Jay interned at the city hospital in the surgical department. Yes, he had a specialty in cancer patients. But to successfully complete his training and get a full medical degree, he needed more surgical practice. So he tried to assist in all the surgeries performed in the hospital during his shifts. He and his colleagues were picking up a motorcyclist after an accident, amputated an infected limb. An avid smoker had a peritonitis appendix excised. Several times he managed to stand up together in surgery with his father. He has a steady hand and no emotion. Just what you need for a real surgeon. Peter complimented him in front of his mother. But don't tell him that, or he'll get cocky. In addition to internship, Jay conducted scientific work at the Institute, researching the impact of laser methods on the foci of malignant neoplasms. He read numerous articles by foreign authors and proposed to the Institute's management to conduct a number of experiments. We will be able to understand how best to proceed to surgery when the patient's body is exhausted from the long struggle with the disease. Jay, you have great ideas, the head of the department told him. But you know the state and financing of modern medicine. We can only buy equipment and learn how to use it. And to conduct our own research, alas, we need much more money. Well, let's try to apply for a grant, Jay insisted. Maybe we won't succeed this time, but we'll be remembered, and next time we'll get money for research. You're young and overly optimistic about life, but if you want to bang your head against the wall, I'm putting you in charge of submitting our department's work for grants. Go for it. If you succeed, we'll all be very happy. It was close to 5 o'clock in the evening, his feet stirring the March snow, and he was walking from the institute to the hospital. Thinking about the last conversation he'd had about the research paper and having internal dialogues, he slipped and swung his arms. He fell, accidentally dropping the girl he'd been walking with a moment before. Oh, I'm sorry, please. Jay apologized before he could get up. Did you hurt yourself? No, I fell on you and you're softer than asphalt. She smiled, trying to get up. Jay finally got up and gave her a hand. Then they shook it off together. I'd been so busy thinking about it that I hadn't noticed the treacherous ice under the snow. The important thing is that my arms and legs are okay. How about you? I'm fine. Well, maybe a bruise, but it'll pass. Come on, let me take a look at you. Jay pointed his glove at the hospital. I just got out of there. Are you a patient? No, I work there. A doctor? Why haven't I seen you before? No, I'm an accountant. Doctors and I don't see much of each other. Oh, so that's who pays my salary. All the more reason to go. I don't want to lose my bonus. Come on. But I'm not responsible for salaries and bonuses, especially since I don't even know who you are. Mr. J. I'm a doctor in the surgical department. Charlotte. Nice to meet you. While Jay examined the girl, they laughed about the funny thing that happened. Everything seems fine. I'm letting you go, but you have to promise me something. The doctor concluded. What? Charlotte was surprised. That you'll go out with me so I can make it up to you. But you examined me. It's all right. There's no guilt. I examined you like a doctor examines a patient, but I want to make it up to you like a man to a woman. Do you agree? I do. Charlotte readily agreed. Wednesday after work, then. I'll have just enough time to rest from duty, and I'll be waiting for you near our unfortunate place. Already on the first date, Jay realized that Charlotte was his person. She was easy to talk to about all sorts of topics. He laughed and told her about his guitar playing experience. Charlotte told him that she had dreamed of being an actress as a child. "Didn't you get in?" Jay asked. "I didn't even try." "Why not? It's a long conversation and a lot of memories. Let's do it another time." "Why did you become a surgeon?" "There were a lot of good and bad reasons. But the main thing is that we have a medical dynasty. My great-grandfather, father and mother are surgeons. My grandfather is an infectious disease specialist. My grandmother is a general practitioner. And we could go on and on. Was there anyone else in your family besides the medical profession?" "Yeah, an aunt. My father's sister. She works in the Philharmonic. She's out of the picture." "So what? Your family's wives pick their husbands out of their co-workers?" "No way. It just happened. And suddenly it turned into a family profession. Listen, if you like theater, maybe you'll go to a concert with me? I'm kind of indifferent to concerts." "Oh, please. There's a Spanish guitarist coming. He plays classical guitar. I don't really feel like going alone." "That's fine. I'll keep you company. But there's one condition." "What's that?" "You'll go to the theater with me later because I don't like to go there alone either." "What play?" "I don't know yet, but I'll try to find something interesting." "Done." "Mom, what's the best thing to wear to a concert?" Jay stood in front of the closet with his clothes and couldn't decide. "How long have you been interested in this stuff? In case you've forgotten, you always wear jeans." Julia smiled. "Mom, it's a classical guitar, Philharmonic concert. And in jeans? What's stopping you?" "Well, I'm going with a girl and still jeans." "That's interesting. But still jeans and just a decent t-shirt. Or should I wear a shirt?" "Who's the girl? What's her name?" "Charlotte. She works at the hospital." "A doctor?" "No. A nurse." "Mom, who cares? She's an accountant." "Wow. That's more than we've ever had in our family. How'd you two cross paths?" "I knocked her down." "What do you mean?" "Well, I mean I slipped, fell, woke up, girl. No cast, thank God. Neither of us have a cast. So you're just going straight to the concert? Why so soon?" "I've already been on a date with her. She's fun. Interesting. She wanted to be an actress, but it didn't work out." "Yeah, that's what we dream of being. Take this shirt. Have a good vacation." "Thank you." "So, what did you think of the concert?" Jay asked as he walked her home. "You know, I didn't expect it, but I really enjoyed it. He's a virtuoso. And that woman, the dancer, she just looked so organic against the music. I'm happy with that too. Thanks for agreeing to go with me." "Have you chosen which theater we're going to?" "I have. But it's a secret. What if I'm not dressed properly?" "You'll be dressed as usual. There's no dress code." "Mom, I think I'm in love." Jay looked at his mother with shining eyes. "How did you know that? Do you remember when we went to the concert? I asked you about your clothes." "I remember. Charlotte asked me to go to the play. I asked her where. She said it was a secret. Where do you think she took me?" "I'm afraid to imagine if that's the conclusion you're drawing." "Mom, she took me to the Children's Musical Theater to see Carlson and the Kid. You realize my whole childhood was wasted if I didn't see that show. So wasted. You didn't have time in your childhood. Sports, guitar. What about Carlson? And after that you realized you were in love?" "I probably realized it earlier, but now I'm finally convinced of it." "Well, congratulations. That means your life is about to take on new colors. Where are you going next time?" "I want to take her skating." "What if she doesn't know how to skate?" "All the better. I'll teach her." "Go ahead. Do it. Just don't forget about work." After a couple months of dating, Jay invited Charlotte to meet his parents. "Well, I don't feel comfortable. They're all scientists and doctors, and I'm just an accountant. Don't minimize what you're good at. You're not an accountant. You're an amazing girl. And I'm really glad I tripped you the other day." "That's how you talk. So you didn't just invite me in for a checkup?" "Of course not. I'm a doctor. I had to make sure everything was okay. You've been checking for 2 months now. But there are hidden injuries. I can tell you that as a doctor. So you'll come?" Sure." And before the end of the summer, Jay was confirmed for a new research grant. The hospital gave him a raise too. and the young man could afford to rent an apartment near the hospital. Now he and Charlotte lived together and walked to work. Parents did not question the young couple, but the fact that they lived without registering their relationship was difficult for the older generation to understand. It was almost 3 years before Jay and Charlotte came to visit, and the son said, "Dear parents, I congratulate you. You will soon become grandparents. What wonderful news. How are you feeling, Charlotte?" "I'm fine. The doctor said the fetus is developing normally. How far along are you?" 12 weeks. While Julia asked Charlotte for details, her father took Jay aside. "Aren't you guys going to register? Do you want the baby to be born without a father? Why no father?" "Dad, here I am. Why do you have to get married?" "We discussed it and decided we don't need it." "Did you decide or did you want to?" "Either way, your situation is about to change. And I think we should bring it up again with Charlotte." Registration took place when Charlotte was already 7 months pregnant. From the wedding, the girl categorically refused and came to the registry office in ordinary clothes. It seemed to her that everyone looked at her with regret. And on Jay, too. She constantly hid her eyes and dreamed of leaving the ceremony quickly. After the parents booked a table at a restaurant, where the 4 of them celebrated the event. Soon, Charlotte went on maternity leave and stayed at home. Jay disappeared at work, and she complained to her mother-in-law that she didn't know what to do to keep herself busy. "Enjoy the peace," Julia told her. "Soon you won't have any." When Mark was born, all the worries fell on the young mother's shoulders. Her husband worked shifts at the hospital, did research, and lectured at the institute. My mother-in-law, although she was supposed to be retired, continued to work. And then there were Jay's old grandparents, who also needed care. Charlotte sometimes went mad from the constant hassle, which exhausted her to the point of exhaustion. She hardly saw anyone close to her because as soon as someone came to help her babysit, she would go to bed. The need for sleep was the greatest. "Jay, get Charlotte a helper," his mother told him once. "She's dried up after 6 months with Mark. It's gonna get harder from here." "Mom, I don't make that much money. You're basically working 3 jobs and you can't hire a woman to help Charlotte, even if not with the baby, but at least around the house?" She discussed it with Peter, and they made arrangements at the hospital with an elderly nurse, Mrs. Natalia, who was able to visit her sister-in-law. She, on the other hand, told Charlotte about the happenings at the hospital, the doctors, the accidents, the patients. The young mother was distracted from caring for her son and felt at least a little involved in her team. In addition, Natalia had raised 3 children herself. She told Charlotte how to manage her young son. Sometimes it seemed to Charlotte that the woman became closer to her than any of her husband's relatives, who hardly participated in Mark's life. By the age of 2, when Mark finally went to kindergarten, the 2 women had become friends. So when Charlotte returned to work, Natalia would drop in on her every now and then. "Charlotte, hi. How's Mark doing?" "Hello, Mrs. Natalia. He's fine. He loves it at daycare. I asked him what he likes. He tells me rhythmics. And at home he asks me to play music and walks with his steps like they teach him. That's great. I told you musically we have a boy growing up. He's been listening to music since he was a baby. And he doesn't get sick? Well, sometimes he gets sick. Well, you've toughened him up so much that it all goes away in a day or 2. That's great. Can I come and see you sometime?" Sometimes it seemed to Charlotte that Mrs. Natalia was more interested in Mark's life than his father or his grandparents. No, they were always helpful if asked, but they were not interested in the child's hobbies, how he spent his weekends, and many other little things that usually characterized loving relatives. Charlotte thought that maybe that was just the way it was in their family. But somewhere inside she felt a little resentment for her son. Remembering her childhood love of theater, and seeing her son's enthusiasm for music and dancing in kindergarten, she took Mark to his first performance in a children's theater at the age of 5. It was a musical story based on the fairy tale The Wolf and the 7 Little Goats. Jay's research was reaching its final stage. He got the result he was seeking and planned to defend his thesis on the basis of his work. His parents were proud of him and helped him in every possible way. In particular, they allowed him to write at their house so that he wouldn't be distracted by Mark in his apartment. Jay came home 2 or 3 times a week, playing with his son and talking to his wife. But their relationship was more neighborly than marital. Charlotte increasingly realized that she'd made a mistake in marrying him. Sometimes she thought it would have been much easier if she had been alone. Jay hadn't called his wife to his defense, but his parents, colleagues, and some students who were interested in the surgeon's work were there. He noticed a red-haired girl there, listening intently and making notes in her notebook. What was his surprise when he met her at the hospital? "Hello. I think I saw you at my defense. What brings you here?" "Hi, Mr. J. I'm Betsy. I'm doing my internship here. Nice to meet you. Are you a student of mine?" Unfortunately, no. But I'd love to be. But I'm more of a listener. I came across your work in a magazine and decided to come to your lectures. And then I saw the announcement of your defense and came here. What kind of surgery are you interested in?" "Mostly traumatology, but it sometimes involves subsequent neoplasms. That's why I'm learning how to avoid it. That's a commendable endeavor. I can provide you with more detailed results after approval and publication." "Thank you." From then on, Jay went to the hospital with the hope that their shifts would overlap. They often did. They drank coffee together in residency, talking about surgery and life. Then Jay invited Betsy to the coffee shop. "Let's not talk about work today, let's just talk about life. Where do you live and what are your hobbies?" "I'm actually from out of town. I came here because you have a medical school. Now I rent an apartment. My parents help me. And from hobbies I like music. I even went to music school when I was a kid." "And you?" "I'm from a dynasty of doctors. You could see your parents at the defense. I really like to listen to classical music, especially guitar." "No way. I just graduated from guitar school. So maybe you could play for me sometime? Do you have an instrument?" "Sure. Let's go to my place." Jay sat in the chair and watched Betsy strum the strings as the magical music wafted through the apartment. It was so beautiful and centered that Jay could listen to the tune endlessly. Finally, Betsy put the instrument aside. "Would you like to have dinner? We've been sitting here so long I'm starving." She's very sincere too, Jay thought. But he said aloud, "I'm hungry too. Why don't we go to a cafe?" "Why? We're at home. I can cook. Do you have any food restrictions? Or maybe you don't like something?" "I like anything that's deliciously cooked." "Well then, I'll be in the kitchen. Can I help you?" The best help is to stay out of the way. Half an hour later, there were fried potatoes with mushrooms and pickles on the table. "God, it's so simple and delicious," Jay marveled as he ate. "Betsy, you're a magician." "Don't exaggerate, Mr. J. Listen, why are we still on a first-name basis? Maybe it's time to switch back to first name." "Just Jay then." "All right, Jay, let's give it a try." The delicious food and warmth made Jay swelter. While the girl was clearing the table, he accidentally fell asleep on the chair and woke up to her covering him with a blanket. Jay caught her hand and pulled her to him. Betsy didn't resist. She ended up in his lap. They kissed long and passionately. The man's hot hands gripped Betsy's body tightly while gently stroking her neck, her back, and lower and lower. Betsy nestled her whole body against him. Jay could feel his desire and Betsy's breath. He carefully unhooked her bra and touched her breasts. "Jay, there are going to be rumors flying around the hospital. It wouldn't be good if Charlotte knew about them." "How long have you been believing rumors?" "I'm not talking about believing them or not believing them. I'm talking about the fact that you have a wife and kid who might find out about them. Especially since Charlotte works at the same hospital as you. Tell me, do they have a basis in fact?" "Mom, what's with the interrogation?" "Listen, son, things happen in life, but we don't divorce in our family. So if anything, you need to solve this problem. What if that problem is called love? That's how you talk. Well, if that's the case, you need to talk to your son's mother first. Or are you chicken?" "No, I'm not scared. In fact, I think Charlotte would be happy to see us go." "Jay, it's your life, and it's your problem to solve. You will always be our son, just like Mark will always be our grandson. So I suggest you discuss this with your wife." "Mrs. Natalia, why are you so downcast? Did something happen to you?" Charlotte asked the woman she'd met in the hallway, and she hid her eyes from her. "You haven't been in for a while, and Mark is asking when Natalia is coming." "Oh, Charlotte, I'm well, and I'll come to see Mark soon. Only thing is..." "What is it?" Is there someplace we can talk alone? There's some benches in the backyard. The weather's nice. Let's go over there. That's the rumor going around the hospital about Jay. The woman finished her story. But don't get too upset. Maybe it's just a rumor. Jay's a surgeon from God, and you have a son. Thank you for telling me. Charlotte replied thoughtfully, remembering the last couple of months with her husband. He seemed to be more attentive to his son and to her. Was he making amends? A thought crossed her mind. Don't worry about it. We'll work it out. You come and see Mark. He misses you. Yes, I will. When can I come over? Tonight. That's great. I'll come by tonight then. Jay was on duty. While Mrs. Natalia played with Mark, Charlotte thought about how and when to talk to her husband about the rumors at the hospital and what she would do if they were true. She could divorce him, but it would be a pity for Mark. He'll grow up without a father. Although he's not even here right now. He's either at work or nowhere. I thought he'd show up more often after the defense. But no, I was wrong. And I can't expect any help from my mother-in-law. They're a dynasty. I just happened to be around. Jay put his son to bed and went into the kitchen. Charlotte, we need to talk. He started hesitantly. I think so too. She leaned back in her chair. There are all kinds of rumors going around the hospital. Is there anything you want to tell me? I've fallen in love with another woman. The husband lowered his eyes to the floor. I didn't know how you'd react to it, so I delayed. How would I react? I'm very hurt. I didn't want to marry you, remember? But you insisted and persuaded me. Well, it's my own fault. I should have been more firm in my intentions. You can leave right now. And I'm warning you, no matter what happens, you can't go back. Remember that. I just feel sorry for Mark. I'll come to see him. He'll hardly know the difference. Who are you telling? You can lie to Betsy, but I know you. And when you have kids of your own, you're gonna have kids of your own. But anyway, you can talk to your son whenever you want. I won't forbid it. It's for his own good. Now you can pack your things and go. Late that night, Jay walked into his parents' apartment with a suitcase and a backpack. Gone? Asked the father. The son nodded and went to his room. After Jay left, Charlotte's life became easier. She only had one man of the family to think about. And Natalia came over to socialize and babysit. You know, Charlotte, it's true what they say, everything you do is for the best. You look better, you're calmer. And what a beauty. Much better than Betsy. After the divorce, Charlotte quit her job at the hospital to see less of her former relatives and found a job at the Housing and Utilities Department. In addition, she could now attend theaters and concerts at will, without looking back at anyone. Sometimes they went to a play together, Charlotte, Mark, and Natalia. Mark had enrolled in a theater studio in high school. Charlotte couldn't always come to his plays, but the former nanny went to everyone. And then reports back to the kid's mom. He played the musketeer today. Yes, so cool, and sword swings, as if he lived at that time. She told Charlotte after the visit. Mark also asked permission to attend the vocal class and enjoyed going there on his own. Mark, just keep up with your studies. All those theaters and clubs are great, but they don't help you get a good grade. Jay sometimes went to visit his son on weekends and took him to the zoo or a museum. Mark enjoyed spending time with his dad. He just didn't like to visit him at work in the hospital. So many people are suffering there. I don't want to see that, he told Charlotte. But your dad and the other doctors are treating them. I know they do. But I still don't like being there. Jay was occasionally annoyed by his son's attitude, and he told Charlotte, "You're raising a coward. What happens to his life if he gets into trouble? If you suddenly fall ill, will he turn a blind eye and not look after you either? Jay, he's just a sensitive boy. I'm more than sure that if I or you need help, he'll be there. But I don't think it's a good idea to test him too much." In high school, Mark won the city recitation contest. His mother and Natalia were happy, but his father showed his displeasure again. He was in the wrong line of work. It's time to get ready for college. And he's reciting poems. First of all, not poems, a poem. Secondly, maybe that's how he's preparing. Where is he preparing for? To the Literary Institute? Ask your son. Don't interrogate me. Jay was furious when he heard that his son was going to go to theater school. He took his frustration out on his ex-wife again. What did you raise? Is he going to be a singer, an actor for the public's amusement? Is that possible? You left the family. He wasn't even 7 years old. You used to live with us. Your upbringing was useless. I raised my son well. He doesn't steal. He doesn't lie. He sympathizes with people. Let him be whatever he wants to be. It's just that you couldn't get into acting and now you want him to do it for you. What do you want? You want him to become a doctor? To continue your dynasty, so to speak? Well, he's long gone from your family, and your Betsy will give you future doctors. She'll give birth in 6 months and we'll see who else succeeds. You're gonna have a competition between your own children? You're out of your mind, dear doctor. After this conversation, Mark didn't want to see his father. He never refused him outright, but he always found reasons to avoid seeing him. Besides, he was really preparing for college and going to tutors. Jay and Betsy had a son, Dakota, in the spring, and the father was no longer concerned about his oldest child. Charlotte also sighed calmly because she was already tired of hysterics on the phone about the choice of Mark's future profession. "Why are you proving this to me?" she asked in her last conversation with him. "Tell him yourself, because you can influence him." "So you're saying you can't influence him as a father?" "Don't mince words. I'll talk to him myself." "Mark, have you thought this through? Why do you want to study theater? There are many other professions, more masculine. Maybe not a doctor, but at least a driver or a fireman. Dad, you watch movies. Do you like them?" "Of course I watch movies. Some movies I like." "Well, you won't believe it, but they have male actors playing male roles. It's a very masculine profession. And then there's the stuntmen, the directors, and most of them are men. But that's not true. So you don't believe what happens on the screen?" "No, of course I do. But then you remember it's just a movie. So it's not such a bad movie that you believe it for a moment. You see, I like to create this illusion for people. And they say I'm good at it. I can always make it as a driver. By the way, I can reassure you. There's always a lot of competition for theater school. I might just not get in. And you'll be satisfied then?" No, son. I'm not saying you shouldn't get in. I'm just saying that maybe you should choose another profession, like a doctor. I'm sorry, that's not my thing. Mark, if you go there, you'll ruin our relationship. I'm sorry you feel that way, but I'm not changing my mind. My son hung up on me. Oh, come on. Jay exhaled in frustration. Why are you so opposed to your son going to theater school? Peter, who was an unwitting witness to the conversation, came up to him. Dad, but you realize it's not a profession, don't you? And then, what about the dynasty? In order to raise your son the way you want, you have to live with him. And you left your family for another woman, leaving not only your wife, but also your child. After that, you want him to listen to your opinion? I wanted to be a musician too, but my father and your grandfather were always there to steer my thoughts in the right direction. Where were you when Mark was growing up? Musician, actor. If he's so independent, he can continue to do without his father. You'd think you'd scare him with that. Peter left the room. Just before his son left, Jay made one last attempt and called Charlotte. Where are you letting him go? He won't get in and he'll come back to you a drug addict or alcoholic if he comes back at all. That's how you think of him, Charlotte replied calmly. I don't think you know your son at all. I'm sure Mark is a sensible and decent boy. Besides, he's bound to get in. Unlike you, I wish him the best of luck. She hung up. Mark stayed with his younger sister, Mrs. Natalia, for a while. She lived far from the institute, but surrounded the young man with care and attention. Call me Grandma Clara. She smiled at him at the first meeting. Can you show me what you can do? At one time, Grandma Clara worked as a costume designer in the theater. She knew little about the admission, but she was always ready to tell tales about actors and the peculiarities of work in the theater. In the evenings at tea, Mark listened to her stories, and then at performances sometimes could use something learned from them. The young man passed all 3 rounds of auditions and selection competition, after which he was taken to study. He bought a big cake and came to see Mrs. Clara. Grandma Clara, I got in. I'm going to study now. Let's celebrate. Oh, you're so good. I knew you'd make it. Let me kiss you. The old lady kissed him on both cheeks and went to put the kettle on. Mark began to call his mother. At home, the women were preparing for Mark's arrival. His mother bought his favorite cake from the store, and Mrs. Natalia baked cabbage pies. The son didn't come empty-handed. He brought his mother a beautiful bag for the theater. "Mom, you'll come to my play only with this bag, won't you?" "Baba Natalia, this is for you." Mark took out a silk handkerchief. They sat in the living room drinking tea, and the young man told the peripetειas of his admission. At that time the bell rang. "It's Papa," he said, and went out into the other room. "But what, you got in after all?" Jay started without greeting. "Yes, Dad, I got in." "Well, then you are no longer my son." Dad hung up the phone. Mark looked at the screen, grinned sadly, and shrugged his shoulders. "Dad, did you congratulate me?" Charlotte asked. "He said I was no longer his son and didn't want to talk to me anymore." There was silence at the table. "Well, God will judge him." Natalia interrupted him. "Who wants more tea?" Charlotte exhaled and began to ask her son about Baba Clara and his fellow applicants. She could see that Mark was uncomfortable after his conversation with Jay. But gradually he pulled back and began to talk more about the school. "How is Mark doing?" Jay's mother asked Jay when he came to see her and his father. "I don't want to know him, and don't say that name in front of me again." He got angry. "Jay, what's wrong?" His father looked at him in surprise. He'd gotten into acting and now he was proud of it, as if he'd performed a complicated operation without mistakes. "I only have one son, Dakota, now. There are no others." "How so, Mark?" The mother gasped. "I warned him beforehand that if he got in, our relationship would be ruined." "Well, did he make it?" "I see. Mother, you and I have 2 grandchildren. Peter turned to his wife. "Why don't we go and congratulate Mark ourselves? Or are you going to stop talking to us too?" He turned to his son. "Do whatever you want. I don't want to hear from him." The grandparents called Charlotte and asked permission to come and see their grandson. "Mark, your grandmother and I congratulate you on your admission. You had to overcome not only a difficult competition, but also your father's resistance. He never realized that there are other professions. I guess that's our mistake. We wish you good luck and hope to see you on stage and in movies in talented and unique roles. We hope that our last name will become known not only for medicine, but also for the theater arts too." Mark didn't think studying for the course would be so hard. It didn't seem to be necessary to apply formulas or count chemical reactions, but to memorize huge chunks of text with the necessary intonation and then give it all out with artistry and inspiration. It made him tired very quickly. They gathered in the dormitory as fellow students and discussed possible variants of pronunciation, practiced diction and gestures. The course was friendly, and together they tried to perform at concert venues where they were invited, acting out skits and miniatures. On New Year's Eve, all the students dressed up as Santa Claus and Mrs. Claus and went to congratulate children on demand. In such a costume, he came to Grandma Clara just before New Year's Eve. "Well, Grandma, Happy New Year," he exclaimed theatrically in his bass. "Santa Claus has come to visit you. Can I come in?" Clara Ilyinichna was confused. "Come in, grandfather, even though I didn't invite anyone. Have you made a mistake, dear man?" "No, Grandma Clara. No mistake." Mark laughed, taking off his hat and beard. "Happy New Year. I've brought you a present," and he went into the bag for a set of sweets and a packet of tea. "Mark, come in. We'll drink to the holiday." Mark sat at Clara's for a while and went to celebrate the new year with his fellow students. The next time Mark could come home was in February. He told his mother about his studies, about his first auditions on stage, on shoots, about the children he congratulated. "How are you?" "I'm fine, son. But Grandma Natalia is ill. She's in the hospital now. I visit her. It would be good if you went to see her too." "Grandma Natalia, why are you lying here?" Her favorite Mark entered the room. "It's still morning and you're already tired." "Oh, Mark is here." The old lady smiled. Wait. I'll get up now." "No, don't. If you want to lie down, then lie down." "What's going on?" "I'm just over the threshold. So you decided to be sick?" "Grandson, tell me how you're doing." While Mark was sitting at Natalia's, he saw his father passing by in the corridor. He wanted to say hello, but restrained himself, remembering Jay's last words. He said goodbye to Mrs. Natalia and walked toward the exit. In the morning, Charlotte received a phone call that Mrs. Natalia had died. At least she waited for you," said her mother, hanging up the phone. Grandma Natalia's younger sister took the news stoically. "What to do?" She waved her hands. "Thank you, grandson, and your mother for brightening her last days. I hope there's someone for me at the end of my life." "What are you talking about, Grandma Clara? You're a relative of ours now, too. So don't even think about being alone. Now you have us, and we have you." "Well, God willing." Mark cried at the funeral, unashamedly. Baba Natalia had replaced his numerous relatives who had not cared for him as a child. Clara stood beside him and whispered quietly, occasionally wiping the corners of her eyes with her handkerchief. At home, she baked cabbage pies according to her sister's recipe and gave them to everyone after the funeral. Charlotte offered to let Clara stay with them temporarily. "What are you going to do there alone?" "It's just the three of us here for now, and then Mark will be gone, so it'll be just the two of us. We'll have someone to talk to, someone to drink tea with." "Thank you, Aunt Charlotte. It's my pleasure. Just let Mark stay with me while he studies." "Grandma Clara, I don't feel comfortable. I have friends in the dormitory, the school is close by. But I promise you that I'll come to see you often, especially if you bake such cakes. I'll bring my friends too." "Bring them, grandson. Bring them. I'd love to have tea with you." In the summer, Jay took a vacation and went to the sea with Betsy and Dakota. His wife wanted to go during the velvet season, when it would be less hot. But Jay had a scientific conference planned, so the vacation fell at the end of August. Betsy at the resort bought herself and Dakota a lot of unnecessary, from the point of view of his father, trinkets. But it's a vacation. Let her enjoy the sea, the food, and the shopping. Dakota learned to build sand castles and was ready to spend the whole day on the beach. Betsy dragged him to his room and made him sleep. Sometimes Jay was annoyed at the way she spoke to her son in a commanding tone, so he would take some of the hassle and let his wife relax and sunbathe or go shopping alone. Just before the flight, a scandal broke out. "You do not think about me and the child," Betsy reproached him. "We'll be right back, and you'll be lost at work. The boy needs his father's company. He needs to have a male role model in front of him. You're suggesting I quit my job and take care of my son? I'm suggesting you quit at least one of your jobs. Give up research or teaching. How long can you stand at a desk? You should have a standard workday with weekends off and no call-outs. Look, Betsy, you've been a doctor yourself, you know the pace. Patients aren't going to wait around. I agree. But I don't want it to be your patients, I want it to be someone else's. What about charity, helping your neighbors?" "Jay, don't. They're just words, and you know it." "Betsy, I'm having my biggest scientific conference in September. Doctors from all over the country are coming. My whole family's invited, my parents and me. Let's do a presentation, get the results out, and then we can talk about changing jobs. Okay?" "I hope so." With a disgruntled look, replied the wife. "Because I'm already thinking about whether it's time for me to intervene? Is there something else you need? I was just saying that you could do a better job as a father?" "No, that's not what you said. You want to find another father for your child and another husband for yourself? Well, you know, if you're going to leave me, I'm going to sue you for Dakota. You're not getting him." "We'll see about that," Betsy replied and left the room. Jay dreamed of a van. He was riding in it with his parents and other passengers. They were talking animatedly. Lights flashed in the windows. Suddenly there was a bang. Jay opened his eyes, his heart racing. He was lying on the bed with the equipment next to him. The man couldn't move an arm or a leg. He had a headache. Jay wrinkled his nose and fell into oblivion again. During the night, Charlotte got a call from her former job. "Charlotte, hi. Jay's in trouble and we can't get through to his wife. Do you know how to find her?" "Hi. No, I don't. Maybe Jay's parents can help." "Unfortunately, they can't." "What's wrong?" "Look, you know we can only talk to relatives, but we can't find them. I'm telling you because we need someone to help us. Jay was in a car accident. Is it that serious? It couldn't be more serious. A minivan carrying conference attendees crashed head-on into a dump truck. There are fatalities, and Jay's in serious condition in the ICU. Okay, I'll be right there. Have the parents been notified?" "The parents are dead." Charlotte gasped. "How?" "It was a pretty bad blow. Only his wife and you, who's a relative. We can't get a hold of Betsy. Jay's address is his parents' address. I'll come over now. Yeah, you do that. We'll have to ID Peter and his wife's bodies and maybe talk to a doctor if his wife is missing. How's Jay? He hasn't regained consciousness. Charlotte sat in the chair and tried to collect her thoughts. All feelings for her ex were long gone. She'd already forgiven him for leaving. Even though they were strangers now, he needed help, and there was no one else to help but her. Besides, he was Mark's father. Mark. Him too, it had to be said. A thought flashed through her mind. Then she looked at her watch. All right, I'll call him in the morning to let him sleep. In the morning, all the news was already telling about a terrible accident on the highway, as a result of which 8 of the 12 passengers of the minibus and the driver were killed. Medics were on their way to a neighboring city for a scientific conference. Helicopters were used to evacuate the injured. Jay was one of 4 survivors. Mark called himself while Charlotte was on her way to the hospital. Mom, did you hear? Yes, son, I'm on my way to the hospital. Was Dad there? He wasn't the only one. And Grandma and Grandpa. You don't usually say things like that over the phone. But Dad's parents are dead. Dad's in intensive care. Mom, I'm just going to take care of the absences and I'll be right over. I'll be there. Okay. Charlotte was greeted at the hospital by the staff. Everyone was in shock. They gave the woman a robe and showed her to Jay. He was lying pale and with his eyes closed. He had tubes, IVs, and electrodes running to him. Did the wife show up? Charlotte asked. The colleagues shook their heads in the negative. The doctor came over. He's unconscious. He's critical. He has a concussion and several fractures. The spinal fracture is the most serious. It's too early to make any predictions. Charlotte ID'd her ex-mother-in-law and father-in-law at the morgue. Their bodies have already been cleaned up. She's been given the paperwork, and she's gone to make the funeral arrangements. Hopefully, in the meantime, Betsy will be found. When she got back to the hospital, there was a policeman waiting for her. Hi, can I talk to you for a minute? Yes, of course. We found out that Mrs. Betsy and her son left the country last night for Spain. We're currently searching for her with our embassy. Could you help us with the accident investigation? I'm ready, but I don't even know how to help. First of all, we'll need to look through the belongings and see which ones belong to your ex-husband's family. Well, I'm ready. Mark arrived this evening. Mom, how's he doing? Did he regain consciousness? He's critical. As soon as he stabilizes and they move him to ICU, then we can set up a shift with him. What about Betsy and Dakota? The police said they left for Spain yesterday. They're looking for them there. But my dad said she had some relatives living there. Yes? I didn't know that. I'll have to tell the police then. What about your studies? Well, it was all over the news this morning. I just mentioned it. They gave me 2 weeks, said I could take a sabbatical if I needed to. Let's find out what's going on with your dad, and then we'll decide. The small minibus in which the medical colleagues were traveling took the highway when it was already dark. A hotel had already been booked in a neighboring town, and the driver promised to be there by midnight. In general, it was planned to leave early, but the technique failed. We had to change to another bus. On the highway, everyone drove quietly. Instead of resting after the working day, they began to discuss the order of reports at the various sessions of the conference. Peter and his wife sat right behind the driver and tried not to disturb the young people. They had been invited as honored workers, and they guessed that they would be awarded with some regular signs for services to national medicine. But just to be among the community of people like them, themselves, to hear about the achievements of modern medicine. The elderly doctors took this opportunity with enthusiasm, especially since not only their son was scheduled to speak, but also the many students they hadn't seen in a long time and were happy to meet again. When Jay pulled out the text of his report and began to show it to his neighbor, the bus veered off to the side. Jay didn't have time to grab onto anything and fell between the seats. He felt a hard impact, and the scraping of metal was the last sound the passengers heard. Jay! Jay! He heard someone calling him through his sleep. At first he thought he was dreaming. Then he tried to open his eyes. Charlotte was standing by the bed. Oh, thank God. He came to his senses. He tried to smile and say something. No, you don't have to do anything. Stay down. I'll get the doctor. Mr. J, how are you feeling? The doctor lightly touched his arm. Jay opened his eyes again and blinked. We're going to unplug you now so you can talk. What's wrong? Jay was the first to ask when he was able to speak. You were in an accident, said Charlotte. Do you remember anything at all? Jay tried to strain his head. I can't. My head hurts. He complained. Do you have a concussion? The meds give me a headache. It'll go away. Try moving your arms and legs. Jay was able to lift his toes. Okay, now the feet. Jay tried, but neither the doctor nor Charlotte saw any movement. Well, let's continue with the treatment, said the doctor and left. At that moment, Mark came in to replace his mom. Mark, how are you here? Jay was surprised. I came to help, answered the son. Where did you come from? Did you leave? Dad was surprised. Okay, Dad, I'll walk Mom out. You lie down for a while. He went out into the hallway. Does he remember anything? Mark asked. Not so far. But as soon as the medicine wears off, he'll remember. Did you tell him about his grandparents? No, of course not. If he doesn't ask, don't tell him yet. The next time Jay woke up was in the evening. Mark was sitting by the bed. Where's Mom? The sick man asked. At work. She'll be here later. How are you doing? I don't know. I don't feel anything but a headache, and some fragments of memories. Well, then sleep. The doctor said the more sleep you get, the faster you'll recover. Charlotte called the police to see if they found Betsy. They did. She's not planning on coming back. How? You said her husband's in the hospital with serious injuries? Of course he is. Can you look after him for now, or should we get social services involved? What services? You what? I'll keep an eye on him for now. My son's here to help. Charlotte recounted her conversation to Mark. So, did she get away? Local police haven't said anything except that Betsy's not coming back. Okay, so it's none of our business for now. I talked to the doctor. He predicts my father won't be able to walk, and he recommends we think about how to organize his life if he's in a wheelchair. Yeah, I've already thought about that. It's definitely a social services thing. I'd prefer a nurse, but I'm afraid we can't afford one. She can live in her parents' apartment. In principle, there are wide openings, an elevator, and a balcony. But we can't leave him there alone. That's the point. Jay's memory was slowly coming back. He remembered the accident. Are the parents gone? He asked Charlotte on her next visit. She shook her head in the negative. Where were they buried? The same place where his grandparents were buried. Why doesn't Betsy come? She's in Spain. Oh, right. Did you two have a fight? Charlotte asked. Well, not exactly. But she said she wanted to be apart for a while. Maybe she doesn't know what happened. Yes, she does, Charlotte said quietly. So she's gone with Dakota for good. The next time he spoke, it was to Mark. Why didn't you go to school? I took a sabbatical. For me? Don't be fooled. For Mom. She couldn't have done it alone, with work and the funeral. You know, I told you I don't have a son, but I didn't tell you I didn't have a father. Mark interrupted Jay. Your hottie's gone after all. When Jay finally regained consciousness, the doctor explained his condition and prognosis. You understand, Mr. J. So I don't see the point in keeping anything from you. After a spinal fracture, there's little chance of regaining motor function in the lower extremities. We need to prepare for a long rehabilitation. My first reaction was panic. What are we going to do with our lives? No loved ones left behind. Rely on Charlotte after what I did to her? And Mark has to go back to school. Then he began to seriously consider his life. He wouldn't be back on the operating table, but he could still do research and teach. Told his plans to Charlotte. I like you better like this. Your job is to heal now, and then life will take its course. You know, I think it already has. He gave his ex-wife some of his savings while he was in rehab. Mark and his mother hired people and remodeled the apartment to make it wheelchair-friendly. The rehab was successful as far as Jay's case went. He couldn't walk, but he was learning to ride in the wheelchair and was already becoming quite dashing. Only 6 months later, Jay was back in his apartment. How comfortable and spacious it was. Where did you put your stuff? Some of it went into storage, some of it was given away, some of it was just thrown away, Mark said. So much junk. I agree, nodded Jay. But you don't have to worry about me now. I'll be fine on my own. We'll help you for a while. I've invited Mrs. Clara to look after the house until you can manage on your own. Thanks, Mark. Where are you going? To school? Yes, Dad. I'm going to continue studying despite all your objections. You know, I've been thinking it doesn't matter where you go to school. I'm sure you'll grow up to be a good man, son. Mark did not believe his words and turned around. Tears were glistening in his father's eyes. Clara took care of not only Jay but also Mark's mom. She cooked meals, cleaned the apartment, went to the store and the market. One day, when they were all gathered for dinner, said to Charlotte, "How long are you going to keep going back and forth? Aren't you tired yet? Why don't you move in here? There's another bed here. There's plenty of room for everyone. It's not convenient for me to call you when you're away, but you'll come by a couple times a week. What's up with you? No small children, no pets. I'll just keep the apartment for now." Charlotte moved in with her ex-husband. The next time, the old lady said thoughtfully, "I look at you, Jay. You seem like a nice guy, even though you're in a wheelchair. What's your point?" The man's tense. "I'm just saying, I don't think you've been rehabilitated very well. Something moved in your head, and it can't get back up. Look at Charlotte, sitting by your hospital bed all the time. She renovated your apartment while you were gone, and now she's taking care of you. Practically provides for you. No thanks from you." "Of course not, Mrs. Clara. I'm very grateful to her and my son for supporting me in my time of need. I'm going back to work now. That's what I mean. You come back and she's still dancing around you. If she turns around and leaves, what are you going to do?" "I don't know. I never thought about it." "You should. I mean, think about what it's going to be like without Charlotte. Probably not good. So, I definitely bumped my head. Mrs. Clara, I don't know what you're getting at. You see, she's protecting you too. Why is that? She loves you, you idiot. And you? I love her too." Jay looked at his ex-wife. "And if you love her, what do? Kiss her. And get married. I thought we were married and then divorced. Who's stopping you from getting married again? Nobody." "You're right, Mrs. Clara. So, Charlotte, will you marry me again? I'm not the man I was when I was young, but I'm wiser, I hope." Charlotte was embarrassed. She didn't think it could turn out this way. Although she had started caring for her sick ex-husband out of compassion, she had gradually grown attached to him as she had in her youth. "Why aren't you saying anything? Don't you want to?" Clara stared at the woman. "I don't mind." Charlotte smiled. "Good. So tomorrow we'll go to apply, and we'll invite Mark to the party to make sure everything is right." When Mark heard that his parents had decided to register again, he was surprised. "Mom, did you think it through? You remember what he did to you, don't you?" "No, son, I don't. I don't remember wrongs at all. I forgive offenses. Maybe that's why I'm at peace with myself. Do you mind? Come on, Mom. It's your life. I'll feel better if you look after each other." Mark's flight was delayed due to trivial weather conditions. At the airport, the young man sat in the waiting room and read the latest newspapers, which were spread in large quantities on the tables in the VIP zone. Wow, there was a medical conference in Stockholm again. And the topic seemed to be fatherly. Oh, how he could speak there. 5 years since the accident, and he hasn't been to one. He says he's still doing research, but for some reason they're not broadcasting it to the world. Says he's not ready yet, and the years are ticking away. I'll have to talk to him again when I get there. When the flight was announced, Mark happily went to board the plane. After a month and a half of absence, he really wanted to go home. Walking down the corridor to the passport control, the young man noticed a group of young people who were discussing something heatedly before reaching the border area. He approached and noticed a man in a wheelchair in the center of the excited interlocutors. Next to the wheelchair stood Charlotte. Her mother approached. She didn't hear him, but his father did. "Mark, what are you doing here? The co-workers have stopped talking. I'm on my way back from the Shakespeare Festival. Where are you from?" "Where from?" "Stockholm. I can't miss a malignancy research conference for the 5th time in a row. I'd be forgotten in academia. Gentlemen of medicine, I'd like to introduce you. My son Mark, a leading actor in the theater." Mark kissed his mom and shook hands with his father's colleagues. "I know you. My wife is a fan. But I never thought you were related to Mr. J. I thought you were just namesakes." As Mark and his parents and his father's colleagues exited the airport building and moved into the parking lot where the young actor's cab was waiting, carrying his father's stroller, constantly stopped, fans asking to sign something. Mom intercepted the stroller, and a line formed at Mark's place of people wanting an autograph. Jay looked up at his wife and winked. I think we're the opposite. We're the relatives of a famous actor. What do you think, Charlotte?